about everybody here and people coming back in with food. And so I'll start now and know that some folks will be coming in just a moment since I sent people out for food. I want to welcome everybody to the inaugural event of this Anthropology Department Scholars Week Conference, which is a tradition in the department of celebrating undergraduate research, so that what we are going to see in this session's presentations are the winners of our Outstanding Undergraduate Research Award. This is an award that we give out every year. It is a monetary award, and it involves submissions of papers from the past spring, fall, and winter by faculty, and then faculty going through all of the faculty in the department have read all of the submissions that were put in and ranked them. And then after deliberation and consideration, we arrive at the top 3 papers. Every paper that was submitted was excellent. It was a seriously difficult thing, but at the same time, these are absolutely outstanding papers that you will be learning about today. And we are so very pleased to see this level of undergraduate research happening here at Western. I think it is something this department really shines at, that perhaps in R1 like UW you don't have, is that you have independent undergraduate research that is not tied to somebody else's project, and that's what we'll see here. I will be announcing each of the award winners one at a time, and then their faculty advisor, who is the one who submitted the paper, will come up and introduce the project. We will hear the presentation of the project, and then I will be handing out the certificate award. We are live on Zoom, courtesy of the Western Foundation and Alumni Association, who have also provided us with support for the refreshments that we have today. And so we may have and hope to have folks who are alums who are also here, and we will be live streaming on Zoom the keynote speech, which takes place tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. And I hope that everyone will also make time to come to that event. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Jerry Eck up here to introduce Jada Love and the project, which I have a title of, but I'll let you give the title of it. I'll just go sit down. And I will give you, also be sure whoever is talking gets a little timer.
Well, it is a honor to be able to introduce Jada. So I wanted to talk about my experience working with Jada, and there's been a lot of that. We've worked together a lot, and it's been a pleasure, as well as the reasons why I thought that Jada's paper stood out as not just an exceptional work, but reflective of the type of work that we're trying to do as a department and as a discipline. So I distinctly remember the first time we had a class together, and it was Intro to Archaeology, a very large class, and I remember Jada stood out as somebody who consistently asked questions, somebody who answered questions when I presented them, and when I tried to turn a lecture into a discussion, which is always slightly awkward. And in the time since, we've had the chance to work together in courses, and Jada has consistently been a central contributor to every class that we've had together, even in a lot of classes where you were taking 400 level courses as a sophomore or junior. So one of the things I've always been impressed about you is your ability to do lots of things well. We usually tend to have our strengths and weaknesses. I've always found that in class that I'm impressed by your ability to weave together theory, different approaches, and to both keep in mind the big picture and to bring together ideas while also doing empirically grounded, sound, detail-oriented work. And that includes in the field, in our work together with the field school. Jada was probably one of the best excavator I've worked with as a student in the field school. I've worked on a lot of field schools. So the reason why I chose the paper for nomination for this award was because it's a great example of a braided approach to archaeological research, and that it's an approach to archaeological work that draws on braided knowledge, which is an approach to bring together different ways of knowing. And I think your paper is a really excellent example of that type of work because it braids together indigenous-led perspectives, feminist perspectives, and it creates a really meaningful connection between the past and the present. And that was why I love that paper. So, so it's my distinct honor to introduce Jada's paper, The Fibers of Knowing, Coast Salish Weaving and Ontology. Oh boy.
That's all right. That's all right. We need some help. I'm not technology savvy. How do you present? Oh, right. It's
Oh, I see. Yeah. I was like. Starting to make your share in Zoom. Well, it went away.
Oh.
It was there for a second. There it is. There we go.
all right. How are y'all doing? Pretty good, I hope. Cool. All right. So, this is Fibers of Knowing, Coast Salish Weaving and Ontology. Oh boy. Okay. So, how do I don't know how to do it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, just to introduce this, this presentation is based on a literature review that I did as a part of the Archaeology of Northwest North America class, where I attempt to understand and articulate Coast Salish weaving through indigenized methods like place-based knowledge and ontological representation. I start with the research background, which is a brief critique on the use of traditional anthropological theories on Coast Salish contexts. Then I discuss the ontologies and place-based knowledge and how these concepts fit into studying Coast Salish culture. And then I apply these concepts to specific examples of Coast Salish weaving culture with mountain goat wool, types of blankets, and weaving as ceremony. I think it's important to start any research on Indigenous topics with a statement of positionality. So my ancestors are, they come from Posen, Ireland, Suffolk, and Germany. I come from settlers of North Carolina, Nebraska, Montana, Texas, and Washington. I was born and raised and continue to live as an uninvited guest on Coast Salish lands. And I grew up with little to no ancestral connection to land, which informs how I approach and understand place-based ancestral knowledge, as well as my ability to communicate what I have learned in ways that are meaningful to people outside of academia. To to preface this presentation, I need to say that I haven't worked directly with any co-Salish knowledge holders on this topic. So the work that I'm presenting is a screenshot of my current understanding based mainly on literature that I have read. My understanding of this topic is subject to change greatly as I continue to learn and challenge my Western academic perspectives. If I misrepresent co-Salish culture, I want to hold myself accountable in future research, and by further education and continued relationship building with co-Salish knowledge holders and the community. It's also important to mention my own ability to understand and apply Indigenous ontologies is not the only challenge presented in doing this type of research. The other challenge that I acknowledge and really welcome is that a lot of ontological knowledge is not accessible to me as a settler, because the knowledge that is accessible is very limited, as I'm from outside of the community. So moving on. Research background. In order to approach the topic of co-Salish weaving, I have actively selected sources and research material that does not use anthropological theory as the main tool of understanding and conveying cultural realities. In this paper, I have stepped away from outdated anthropological and archaeological methods of analysis, like neo-evolutionary theories, processual approaches, and complex hunter-gatherer models, or the complex hunter-gatherer model. Because the issues these analytical concepts continue to bring up, like the homogenization of co-Salish cultural practices in order to generate conclusive data that supports these universal theories of social development and societal function, the idealization of Western society or societal complexity as a mean to justify colonization, assimilation, and extractive research practices. And lastly, to connect back to the topic of this research, an issue that arises from these outdated analysis methods is limiting the function of cultural material like blankets to be purely an economic tool, as the idea only further supports the categorization of co-Salish communities as complex hunter-gatherer societies. I want to be clear, I'm not saying blankets don't serve an important role in co-Salish economies, but the role that they do serve can only be accurately understood through the awareness of what blankets represent within co-Salish ontologies. Categorization in some cases can be very useful, like to structure data sets or language groups. The categorizing becomes a problem when the classes and groups used are not completely culturally or are completely culturally inapplicable. Alison Uris, in an article titled Wrapped in Wool, Co-Salish Wool Weaving in Vancouver's Art, Public and Unceded Territory, discusses how for a long time there was a debate between whether co-Salish weaving was a craft or a fine art. And this type of scholarly debate completely separates weaving from the ontological world that it represents. Debating whether co-Salish weaving is craft or fine art essentially strips the value of woven blankets down to evidence for or against co-Salish cultural complexity. So ontologies and place-based knowledges. In opposition to the theories and methods that I just touched on, I have used these two approaches, ontology and place-based knowledge, as frameworks to understand cultures from internally identified knowledge bases. In other words, these frameworks help me as an outsider of co-Salish culture attempt to understand cultural functions on co-Salish terms. The word ontology is Greek in origin. It refers to the philosophical study of the nature of being, how people interpret and experience both the physical and metaphysical realities, knowledge production, reproduction, and in terms of this research, how cultural material physically represents co-Salish ontologies. Understanding ontologies is understanding the foundational differences between how Indigenous and settler realities function. One example of settler ontology that has become imposed onto co-Salish culture through anthropological research is the idea that humans and nature are inherently separate. They occur as two different spatial environments. Co-Salish ontological realities, even in this one example, prove to be foundationally different. One implication of this example is the idea that one can study how blankets are used in exchange for gift giving and daily function without understanding the place-based knowledge necessary for every stage of that blanket's creation and life, as well as the cosmological and ontological meanings that collect as the blankets are woven and worn. So again, it's important to understand settler ontologies of categorizing space as material, spatial material as human versus nature, so that we do not impose that perception of reality or a nature of being onto co-Salish ontologies of living in relationship with place. I want to also make space for the fact that there's not one co-Salish ontology, but a wide range of realities that typically starkly oppose that of the hegemonic settler ontology that a lot of academics see the world through. So onto my 3 examples. Mountain goat wool for the first one. There are many fibers that can be used in combination with each other while weaving. Some of these fibers include mountain goat wool, Salish woolly dog wool, red cedar inner bark, stinging nettle, Indian hemp, fireweed fluff, cattail fluff, black duck down, and white seagull down. Woven blankets rarely only contain one type of fiber. Often the shorter fibers like the fireweed fluff, cattail fluff, and different down feathers are spun with mountain goat wool or woolly dog wool and cedar bark or nettle fibers to create longer, stronger yarns. For many Coast Salish communities, the mountain goat wool is considered the most sacred fiber. Elder Dr. Ellen Waswat of White OBE, the Sinemu First Nation, says the mountain goat wool is the most pure of all the animals because it lives in remote areas near the sky. Nothing can reach it here. The cosmological and ontological understanding of physical landscapes informs how the value of that wool fiber is imposed. Another quote, Willard Joseph of the Squamish Nation says the strength of the mountain goat is transferred from the mountain goat to the hunter, to the weaver, and into the robe. The example of mountain goat wool shows how spiritual importance of the physical wool and the spiritual representation of the mountain goat and its landscape, and the landscape it belongs to, are reciprocally informed. They work together to build and maintain that place-based knowledge that is then passed on. Yeah. So for types of blankets, these blankets are intentionally woven with meanings based on what they will be used for. There are 3 main types, at least that I've used in this presentation. Sitting blankets, which are the modern recreation of rush mats. They are made for sitting upon during feasts, ceremonies, public or family gatherings. And they line the walls of these gathering areas. Depending on their intended use of the space, different colors and patterns are selected to be used as they represent different values. Some colors and patterns are considered more sacred and spiritually pure, just like the mountain goat wool. And they would be used in specific ceremonies and dances. While sitting blankets are usually the most common blanket to be given out as a gift for a visitor or an invited guest. Standing blankets or memorial blankets are made differently than sitting blankets. They are typically made with specific twill techniques to be much larger and with different colors and patterns from sitting blankets. Standing blankets are ceremoniously laid across the ground to signify sacred spaces. Sometimes entire floors would be covered in standing blankets. Unlike sitting blankets, standing blankets are usually made with a specific person or event in mind, like a marriage ceremony. Like in this picture, for marriage ceremonies, it is custom to lay 4 standing blankets down on the ground for a pair to stand upon while they are blanketed by another one. And the term blanketed refers to the action of wrapping a blanket around 1 or 2 people to wrap them in protection. The action of standing on top of and being wrapped by woven blankets has a specific transformative purpose and has deep ontological meaning and showcases how Coast Salish place-based realities and how people live in relationship with that space, because it is taking this physical moment with all of the stories wrapped around it and creating a new space with that. Blanketing someone is more than wrapping someone in a blanket, but is wrapping someone in every story that has been woven into that blanket. And another type of blanket is ceremony robes. These are specifically made for blanketing ceremonies like the puberty robe or the naming robe, typically smaller than standing blankets. These robes are used to wrap someone in a coming of age ceremony. These examples show how categorizing can be used appropriately because these categories are created and recognized by Coast Salish communities. You can see how imposing categories like craft versus fine art onto these types of blankets really means nothing to the value of ontological reality and what these blankets actually represent. For my last example, weaving as teaching, ceremony, and revitalization. During the weaving process, the intentions of the weaver become imbued into each new warp passing through the wefts. These intentions become patterns. Marcilla Baker of Squamish tells a story of weaving a blanket while singing to it songs she learned from all of the nations she encountered on her canoe journey. She does this so that when the blanket is hung up in the Squamish Lowat Cultural Center, it dances on the walls when the drums play. Many Coast Salish weavers start the weaving process before they know what the blanket will look like. Their patterns form as they work, inspired by the patterns they are taught from their mothers and their grandmothers. From natural motifs weavers observe around them. Held in these weavings is the generational practice of pattern making and place-based knowledge. Chief Janice George of the Squamish Nation speaks to the transmission of teachings and stories learned through ceremony. She describes her weavings as the teachings from her grandmother. To learn these teachings in the right way is to honor her ancestors. Dancing, like weaving, can be teachings in the same way stories are teachings. They transfer knowledge of how to exist in space and in relation to human and non-human beings. Blanket techniques, protocol, and patterns were passed down generationally through oral tradition that accompanies these blankets. The author of a chapter titled Weaving Legacy in the book Salish Blankets, Robes of Protection and Transformation, Symbols of Wealth, which I'm sure we all know of that book. It's really amazing. Compares stories of weavers spanning very distinct time periods that overlap amazingly. The first weaver the author mentions is a basket weaver named, I'm going to butcher this, but Teaxco from the Leighton village, born around 1850. She spoke in an interview about how the teachings of her elders inspired her weaving designs to be innovative and never repeated. She would think of her patterns for months, curating every single detail, then commence the project and execute it perfectly to what she had imagined. Blanket weavers from the 21st century often talk about how their designs will come to them in dreams or as visions, and they will create in their mind's eye a complete pattern down to every detail and then take it upon themselves to physically create this vision. For some patterns come in different ways, though. A modern blanket weaver in this book told about how her pattern never works the way that she imagines it or draws it out, because once the warps are on the loom, the blanket weaves itself into a new pattern. Eileen Wheeler, in the article titled Coast Salish Textiles from Stilled Fingers to Spinning and Identity, talks about how cultural memory becomes activated when Coast Salish women pick up the traditional spinning and weaving tools. The action of spinning weak fibers into strong threads is mesmerizing and a transformative process. Wheeler describes the following sentiment: Salish spinning may evoke a state of altered consciousness that, together with a weaver's spirit, lends to a spiritual dimension and to a functional act. The reality of Salish weavers live is proof that historical and ethnographic data from early colonial periods is not the only viable source for revitalization knowledge. The creation process itself, it evokes an ancestral presence and knowledge that aids that revitalization. So, in summation, I have attempted in this literature review and now presentation to critically and holistically understand weaving traditions as they exist within a broader context of the ontological Coast Salish world. Traditional anthropological theoretical frameworks of analysis alone inaccurately depict Coast Salish weaving realities, and in fact invalidate the Coast Salish ontological values that are intrinsic to woven cultural knowledge. A challenge to these inadequate methods of understanding, like the model of complex hunter-gatherer, is to perform research centered in amplifying place-based knowledge systems. As a settler, I am unable to fully understand Coast Salish ontological context, but I can listen to them and learn from them, and with respect, attempt to braid them with the anthropological methods that I do know. Cultural material traditions like weaving and cosmological spiritual realities are reciprocally informed. To understand one is to understand the other. Weaving is one of the many physical embodiments of Coast Salish ontologies, or ways of being and relating to space and place. Natural materials used to spin fibers into yarn, like the mountain goat wool, have their own stories and teachings that represent themselves within Coast Salish ontologies. The selection of fiber for blankets is intentional based on what the role the blanket will perform. Similarly, the selection of fibers and colors and patterns a weaver chooses signifies the blanket's ceremonial representation. Some blankets have agency in the way they choose their own patterns, and the presence of agency also points to that ontological reality. Expression of Coast Salish culture cannot be validated through contemporary anthropological perspectives alone. This does not disprove those Coast Salish cultural expressions. Rather, it highlights the theoretical flaws in anthropological methods of analysis. As a member of the anthropology and archaeology communities, as members of the anthropology and archaeology communities, we hold the weighted responsibility of understanding and portraying cultures as accurately as possible. To do this in the right way, we have to approach research with respect for the agencies that those cultures and communities have. Understanding ontological differences is one of the ways that we can cultivate that respect. So, I want to say a quick thank you for those, for everyone listening here, and also for a few specific people. Thank you, Jerry, for nominating me and also being such a supportive and caring mentor in my life. I also want to thank Tristan and Bella for setting such good examples of respectful and responsible research, as well as the members of the Stillaguamish Cultural Department, even though their work doesn't really relate at all to what I am talking about now. I have learned a lot from the teachings that I have received from them. So yeah. And lastly, I don't know if this is appropriate, while I have your guys' attention and I have a platform, this is Abed Shahad and his family. He's a colleague of my mother's. He works in Gaza to organize resources and a foundation to help youth mental health, specifically relating to trauma and stress. We've been trying to raise money to get him and his family out to Egypt. We've been able to raise enough money for his wife and 4 daughters, but Abed is still in Gaza. So if you can scan and donate so that he can join his family in Egypt, that would be really amazing. So I'll leave this up for a second.
From the audience, and then I do want to have Jerry come up and I'll present the certificate and we'll do photo op here.
Amazing.
The first questions from folks.
There are none. That's fine. You have a question?
A woman's fiber in a world that look textile
I think that there's plenty of gendered links. I think also the way we understand gender has to be like super analyzed to really approach answering that question. But I think because it is typically a woman's art, the revitalization really comes from that as well, and comes from, you know, giving women the voice that through the art itself that they need. And I think with that as well, I don't want to speak on things that aren't like mine to speak on, but I think that there is a certain level of intimacy and knowledge that gets passed down through women in families. And I think woven material really like captures that physically.
Do you plan on continuing this work?
The question was, do you plan on continuing this work? Yeah, definitely. I am like obsessed with textiles in general. And this was like a tiny little itsy bitsy piece of what I would like to understand. So yeah. And if I could talk to like Coast Salish weavers and maybe learn from them like how it physically feels, yeah, that would be amazing.
Your research on, do you ever come across any of the stories in the production? I know that this is focused on blankets, but the couch and sweaters. The question was through research, did I come across any information on the Cowichan sweater, which is the specific like gray, brown, white knitted sweater? Not so much, because I wasn't like owning my sources to like historical things. I didn't necessarily come across that because I was focusing on blankets mostly, but and that's knitting, which is like a little different than weaving, just ever so slightly. But it's very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come up here. And just want to do the presentation here of the award. There we go. That wasn't awkward at all, no. I'm just going to carry this around with me because I'm going to carry it around with me. The microphone, I'm carrying the lapel mic. Yeah, holding the lapel mic, that's what I do. So thank you very much, Jada. I hope folks will stay, if you are at all able, for our next presentation, which, and we'll get that up onto the, we're doing the tech support stuff, but our second presentation today is Kendall Welch, who was submitted for this competition by Professor Young, and who I would like to invite up and hand off the lapel mic that I can't keep attached to me. And here we go. The candy part is it attached to everybody's voice, not loud people.
The papers that were submitted for this year's awards were all extraordinary, in my opinion. And in my own case, the students in the 490 class, Anthropology at Home, in fall, wrote papers that exceeded my expectations and challenged me and would challenge any reader. In the War and Human Rights class, it was a particular weight for all of the students. There is nothing more difficult for anyone than studying war and human rights abuses in the present time, when it is going on in parts of the world that intersect with our lives. And the paper that particularly impressed me was Kendall's paper entitled Social Media Warriors, the Use of Social Media as a Weapon in War. And it is, as she said, an often overlooked subject, the use of social media in war. But she also points out that although we are place-based, people are able to slip this mortal coil and in fact experience war in ways that are unprecedented. War is not an anomaly. It is part of what it means to be human. But people experience that today through social media in ways that link and transcend place-based education and this mortal coil that we all struggle with at times. And so instead of just going on about these issues, I'll just bring Kendall up here to tell you herself.
Okay. So I did my, let me get this clicked on. I did my paper on social media and modern warfare. I do want to give a statement of positionality and a trigger warning. The following slides contain posts that I pulled off of my own social media that can be harmful and triggering for some. There is graphic and sensitive information, and I would welcome you to turn away from it if you do think it'll cause you to feel any kind of pain, emotional or physical. I also acknowledge that my position as a white American woman may contribute to biases within my research. I am speaking on information regarding the January 6th riot at the Capitol building, as well as social media posts coming from the conflict in Gaza and Israel. As an American woman, these posts that I see are being perceived from my own experience and may be perceived differently depending on where you come from. And I wanted to start with my research questions. My first initial research question was how effective social media was in mobilizing civilians for political cause. I think in the past have acknowledged that social media can be harmful mentally, and there's lots of studies about how it impacts your psychology and your own self-image. But what about when it comes to a political cause and a person that you feel loyal to? What would you do? What lengths would you go to for them? I wanted to know what types of tactics were implemented by politicians and people of power on social media. I also wanted to know about the types of environments that we are engaged in ourselves. How do we get involved directly in war and war activism? And then also the benefits and drawbacks. Like with many things, social media is kind of a double-edged sword, or there's two sides to a coin. It can be both positive and negative. So in the first part of my research paper, I focused on the 2020 election. And the first stage that I noticed kind of in the years surrounding January 6th was sowing the seeds of doubt. Social media is widely unregulated, and it is very easy to spread misinformation and manipulate someone, especially if they aren't media literate. Which I would argue that a lot of us in America are not. As social media is relatively new, it is hard to know what is truth and what is not truth, especially when the social media platform that you are partaking in is titled Truth Social. That title indicates some level of truth at some point, but it also, social media can virtue signal or create a crowd mentality. And using its algorithms can push you into niches or echo chambers in which your own opinions are never challenged. So these posts in the following slides were pulled directly from Twitter and Truth Social. This is Donald Trump's Truth Social account. He talks about transparency, unprecedented times for America. He mentions himself as the 45th president of the United States in this tweet. And again, just information that may or may not be true, but it is really hard to fact check. These are more posts. In these tweets, Donald Trump is using language that is really inflammatory, and I think creates a lot of fear for people that are viewing them, especially if you already felt loyal to President Trump. You would see these tweets, attack on our country, threatening a free country. He calls the USA a third world nation, which a lot of people in his party seem to fear America becoming. And then the Truth Social wait list was 1,419,631 people at one point. So that's a lot of people on one platform where only one side of the story is being shared. And so without any other outside opinions, and also doubting the rest of the media, the world that doesn't agree with your opinion, it can become very easy to fall deeper and deeper into a rabbit hole. Donald Trump also calls out Hillary and Obamacare directly in these tweets. So again, making it so that people viewing these tweets feel like they can only trust Donald Trump himself. The second step was creating a messiah. These are videos that I pulled directly from my own social media, and in the video on the far left, the man in this car is surrounded by officers with their weapons drawn, and he's praying to Donald Trump to come save him from his situation. The person in the middle is worried about LGBTQ+ flags being flown on campuses, and they believe that perhaps the American flag is being replaced, also praying to Trump to come save them from this situation where they feel like their rights and their freedom are being infringed upon. And then, of course, this photo that I pulled from another Instagram account where Donald Trump is posing with Jesus in front of the White House. And in creating Messiah and creating a system in which his word cannot be questioned, he further posits himself as the only person who can protect the American people and the American democracy, which can be a harmful image for a politician. And then these are some of the social media posts that came directly before and after the January 6th riot. I do want to note that the definition of January 6th has been debated between scholars. Whether or not you can call it an insurrection depends on the intention for Donald Trump, and it's really hard to prove intention, and so many people would rather call it a riot than an insurrection, because an insurrection has a very specific political indication. These posts include hashtags that are kind of hard to read on the board, but they will say like "fight for freedom," "we the people," very patriotic. It'll also talk about like threats to your own safety, saying that if this doesn't work out, then the group, which would be, I guess, far right leaning conservatives in America, would be threatened, and that their freedom and liberties would be threatened. It also brought together a lot of different groups from all around America, whereas prior to social media, they may have been more isolated. Social media and the ability to contact people in other areas of the world can provide a platform for people to organize on. So the three different groups, the Oath Keepers, the Florida Three Presenters, and the Proud Boys, were able to work together to organize a lot of what went on in the Capitol. And in this post is directly talking about what they're wearing, where they're going to be. So again, organizing people and condensing them into one centralized location versus being spread out. Also, this imagery here is very patriotic, and it causes people to feel a sense of pride in their organization and what they're doing. And then this is just a few more posts that I saw. The quote, "When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty," from Thomas Jefferson, I think really encapsulates what January 6th became. People felt that they were going to lose their rights as Americans if Joe Biden became president. And I do believe that, not to remove blame from anyone who participated in the January 6th riot, but it is intense manipulation, and it is profiting off of the fear that people felt surrounding this election. But then when you create a messiah, like a messianic figure in politics, when there is a failed attempt at a riot or an insurrection or a protest, sometimes people can enter stages of denial, which we talked about in our War and Human Rights class. But these tweets are showing that denial of failure, saying that the riots were actually Antifa or BLM protesters, or that the FBI staged it. Again, going in with those seeds of doubt and kind of trying to navigate media literacy when you've been told for months and years that everyone opposing you is wrong. It can be really hard to accept, any kind of failure or defeat that they might feel. I also wanted to point out that in this tweet, this person says, "Patriots will not take this lying down. We are awake and ready to fight by any means necessary." Patriots are also peace-loving. Antifa and BLM are not. So very contradictory statements within the same sentence. So just things that you see on social media. Which leads me to the current conflict that we're experiencing with Palestine and Israel. It's hard for people who have not been taught
properly about the conflict, who have only heard about it from neighbors or friends or social media, to really know what's real. On the board is 4 different news article titles that I saw after the ICJ ruling on Israel and Gaza. This one over here appears to be more pro-Palestine. This one here is pro-Israel, saying that Israel is not committing genocide. This one talks about Israel's right to defend itself, and this one talks about Israel needing to prevent genocidal acts. When reading these articles, essentially the information that came out of them was the same, but the titles and the headlines are often the only thing that people look at before moving on, and each of these 4 titles mean incredibly different things. And so I wanted to continue with pulling out information. All of these social media posts were taken from my own social media over the course of a month or 2. This first video is a man who is supposedly in Rafah, who is talking about how it is actually Hamas that is blocking humanitarian aid from entering Rafah, that this is a revolution of the hungry, as you can see in that quote. And the poster, Michael Rappaport, who is an Israeli comedian, he's got 1.2 million Instagram followers at the time of me collecting this post, posted that nobody wants Hamas. This man is a hero for speaking the truth. Again, at first glance, if you knew nothing about this conflict, this post and this video would be incredibly hard to sort through and hard to understand. As you can see, these commenters are talking about the content and whether or not they agree. The first commenter says, "For your information, this man speaking was forced to say what he said. Don't believe everything and anything you said online." The person responding to them says, "Forced by who? You will obviously choose ignorance, even when presented with the truth, which doesn't help the Palestinians. Nothing about that video looked rehearsed or forced." And in the second comment, the top comment is, "Oh, wow, I had no idea those folks were masquerading as Israelis, blocking the food trucks, intentionally starving children were actually Hamas." And there's a few response comments, but essentially because there is no source attached to this post, you can't trace back where this information came from. And if you don't, if you aren't able to trace back where the information came from, often this is the only thing that you have, the only thing that you have to base your own opinions off of. And I also want to talk about the crowd mentality that we mentioned earlier with the January 6th riot. Some of the keys to creating a crowd mentality is finding support in communities with common goals, uniting against a common enemy, which for the January 6th case was liberalism in America. And then the Israeli government provides, like Donald Trump, a sole liberator and protector of Jewish people. Additionally, they will sow seeds of doubt into news stories that support their own narrative. So this video is, I believe, a collection of people at Times Square who are listening to music and waving Israeli flags, and it's all just a very nice community, and it makes people feel very supported and uplifted. And then this second post here was about how it was released on social media, I think, from this Let's Talk brand, but they were talking about how Israeli soldiers executed families at a school. And I reached out to someone directly that I knew, and she gave me permission to use her own words in this presentation, but she is Israeli, and she is contradicting what the original story said, saying that IDF did not go into the school, that Hamas militants were the ones taking refuge there, forcing families to stay and using them as a human shield. Hamas shot people who tried to leave. IDF only attacked Hamas militants. We saved any civilian we could. Then she goes on to talk about Al Jazeera News and how it's manipulating the media, and how they mute portions of videos to hide what the Gazan civilians are saving. And as you can see, this is entirely different from what the other story said, which was that it was the IDF going in and executing these people. And I believe that if you are someone who doesn't know about the conflict and aren't involved in unbiased sources, you can end up with very much one side of the story. And this information, I asked her where it came from and she didn't respond, as you can see, is something that is being fed to her. I also wanted to point out, in these messages, she says, we saved any civilians, and we tried to only attack militants, but she's not part of the army. She is just an Israeli citizen, so that goes along with that crowd mentality where you feel very grouped in with the people that you're supporting or feel loyal to. And also uniting under shared pain and fear. Object, if you're created by the government, can cause people to group together and become almost allergic to any outside news because it threatens what they know. So this Michael Rappaport, again, posted about the hostages held in Gaza. He posted pictures of their faces. I've blocked them out for privacy, but they do look very beaten up. They're bloody, they're scared, they're crying. And that creates shock and anger, and people feel that they need to save these girls specifically. And then this video is a video about PTSD. And yeah. So these were IDF soldiers who've been released from service, but they are experiencing symptoms of PTSD. And a lot of people in Israel and Gaza are going to experience PTSD after this conflict, and they will unite in that fear and that shared pain. And I want to give a trigger warning for the next two slides. The next video depicts sexual assault and children firing automatic weapons. Okay, so the first video was something that came out of Israel right around of October 7th. This is a woman being pulled from a car, and she is bloody, and she also has blood on the seat of her pants, indicating that she may have been sexually assaulted. Emily in Tel Aviv also has millions of followers. As you can see, she's bound. They're holding her by her hair, and they're throwing her back and forth between this car. In the caption and the comments, there were two different sentiments that I saw. The first sentiment was that all of Hamas and Palestinian men are rapists, and this is an excuse to now bomb Gaza. This representation of Palestinian men often is what seeps into our broadcast or like regular news, and it can cause people to feel anger towards a group of people and justify or excuse the murder of lots of people rather than just a few perpetrators. But then in some other commenters' opinions, this video profits on this woman's pain and fear to push a political agenda. This woman has clearly been brutalized, and now her body is being posted all over social media as an effort to gain support for a political movement. And then this video depicts a young child shooting an automatic rifle. This was posted by the IDF. And most of the comments in this video reflected the sentiment that Hamas is training children to fight and kill Jewish people. This is now an excuse to bomb children. The next two videos show children in distress and also depict someone who appears to be a dead child. The first video is coming out of Rafah after a home or neighborhood has been bombed. The children and the mother of these children are being evacuated from the home, and you can see how clearly distressed the children are. The comments in this video were talking about how this video humanizes Palestinian people. It's not just a political war. This is affecting real people and real families who don't deserve to have this kind of treatment, and that the bombs that are being dropped on Gaza are not just targeted at Hamas. The second video is a mother holding her child and singing her child a lullaby. I have also blocked out her face for privacy. As you can see in the video, she's waving away the videographer, and at another point in the video, she attempts to pull her head covering over her eyes. This would indicate to me that she does not want this video to be taken of her, and the videographer posted it anyways. And a lot of comments were also questioning the importance of exposing the truth about what's going on in Gaza versus protecting people's privacy and not exploiting their grief. For a mother to be holding her dead child is incredibly personal and private thing that would bring up emotions that are almost impossible to avoid, and to have someone video you and then post it. This user, Wisam Gaza, has 3.2 million followers, and at the time of this, the time I took this video off of social media, 400,000 people had viewed it. If she didn't want the video taken in the first place, it can be really difficult to justify the difference between sharing the harsh reality of what's going on versus protecting this woman. Which brings me to the more positive side of social media as unregulated information spread. Obviously, the past examples have been unregulated information spread that can be harmful or negative in certain contexts, but these are posts that I saw also directly from my social media that I believe have a more positive connotation. There is spaces for people to share about art. On the far left, a Free Palestine artist uses their art to bring widespread attention to the conflict. You can organize political protests or organize information about divesting from Boeing. And then the environment and impact posted about the environmental impact of weapons being dropped in Gaza. And as you can see at the bottom of these screenshots, they did include about 10 sources so that I could go back and trace where they were receiving their information from. They're also packed with information, and while the posts are shocking, they don't evoke an emotional response as much as the previous post did. So I believe these are more erring on the side of gaining support through logic. As you can see, they continue with this post with about 10 more slides packed with information. And I believe that this is more beneficial when trying to speak about war on social media. This post, same thing. This is informational and emotional. It does list the number of Palestinian people who have passed for each day of the conflict, but they also included their sources, where they were receiving their numbers, and how they received any of this information here, talking about government plans. Biden reverses Trump policy, Israeli airstrikes, where they're going to be, where they have been. And then social media can also be used not only as a place to organize information about war, but as a place for people to express their emotions, rant. This post was taken from someone who is a nurse that I know. As a nurse, she was heartbroken by the humanitarian crisis going on. She sees human suffering every day, and she couldn't believe that she was having to experience human suffering from social media while not being able to help. This person posted about their friend who lived in Rafah and talking about how well respected he was. I believe his friend graduated as a doctor and now cannot escape Gaza. And so this was a place for him to express sadness about the situation. But as many of us know, posting on social media is usually forever, and it does open up for a large community of positive and negatives. In the comments, people do fight about their opinions and their viewpoints. And while posting about social media can be a release, sometimes reading comments that disagree with you can maybe invalidate the things that you're feeling, and make you feel as if people don't support you. But social media itself can become a proverbial battleground for people to fight about their beliefs. But the most powerful message that I found overall was hope. And this is a video that was from the same Wisam Gaza account of prayer at the ruins of a mosque. And in the comments, you can see people saying that the resilience of the people amazes me, their faith gives me faith, that they can destroy the mosques, but not the faith. And I do believe that people have a much better response to hope as the most powerful message on social media, rather than seeing some of the things that we saw previously, which makes people feel hopeless. And then hybrid warfare. It's known, in a literary analysis of a paper on social media technology and tactics, it was discovered that Putin had cut off parts of social media from Russia, and that the only thing people could see was the propaganda that he was releasing. It was a tactic to prevent any outside of information from impacting anyone or perceiving him as not being right in the war. And then I also read an article about a US commander's strategy for social media, in which they talk about using social media for surveillance not only of the American people, but of the people that they were entering into conflict with. This scares a lot of people because it seems like a violation of our rights to have the government use our social media to monitor us in terms of war, especially when most of the citizens of America don't want to be directly involved in the war, whether it be through their taxes paying for war or their opinions being manipulated through social media. And this tweet, this is the 3%. They're talking about how the Capitol is under siege, not a civil war, but an American revolution against tyranny. So if you can imagine that your social media was cut off and this was the only thing you were seeing, it would be easy to consider how people could become maybe patriotic or loyal to one side. And then at the time that I presented this, it was right after the Oscars, and these were posts that were on my social media from the day that I presented it. One of the posts was talking about the red hand symbol that people have been wearing. It's often called the ceasefire pin. However, someone that I know posted that the origin of the red hand was symbolizing the murder of Jewish people because it came after the lynching of 2 Jewish people. I could not find a direct source citing where this red hand came from. However, most people seem to agree that it actually came from an artist who was drawing content and media to support and bring attention to what's going on in Gaza rather than symbolizing the murder of Jewish people. This Rape is Resilience flag was found on a college campus posted by Israel Sisi. In the captions, people feel that they are sick. They feel that this sticker makes them think of their own daughters and their own children. But then someone says that this account is propaganda and a lot of it is photoshopped. And then this comment says, no innocent civilians in Gaza, unfortunately. Again, 2 very different sides of the story, both almost in extremes of how people should be treated. And then this post posted by Israel War Room. Hamas threatens Gazans against cooperating with Israel to secure aid convoys. Again, a very different story than a lot of us have seen, in which Israel is the perpetrator of preventing humanitarian aid from reaching Gaza. So these posts were just posts that I took the day that I presented this. But yeah, and that's all.
I am really struck by the ways that images don't always carry all of the same meaning. I'm wondering, do you feel as if, because I'm looking, I don't think you recognize John Wayne.
No.
And I don't think that you recognize the Uncle Sam Wants You, original poster for that Trump image, which is a very old. But I'm wondering, were you thinking about the audiences to whom these social media were directed, especially since you're drawing from your own personal social media, so it's being influenced to some extent by an algorithm. To explore how you as audience or audience of which you are a member may be shaping these images as well?
Yeah, do I explore how members of the audience might be shaped by the images? Yeah, I do believe that these posts are targeted, again, with the crowd mentality, and like with Truth Social, the only people that are receiving that information usually is the people that already believe in what the post is saying, kind of confirmation bias. And in media literacy, it can be very easy to assume that whatever we're seeing that we agree with is automatically truth, which is why people in the comments were fighting about whether or not some of these videos and photos were staged or photoshopped, because they just cannot comprehend that they might not be. And when I was doing the research for this paper, there were 5 steps to being media literate. And the first step was looking for sources. The second step was confronting your own bias and saying that just because I believe something is true already doesn't mean that this post might be true. The third step was wondering what the goal of the account was. For Michael Rappaport, who is an Israeli comedian, his goal is to shock you and is to make you, I mean, in my opinion, his goal is to make you hate Palestinians so that their treatment can be justified. And so his post will reflect that sentiment. So it's important to know what the goal of the post is, which is why I included the posts from environment and impact, because their goal wasn't necessarily to shock you, but to inform you and educate you. But yeah.
What are the other steps?
The first was sources, second was bias, third was goals, fourth was, I believe, communication with people. So reaching out to the people that did post certain things and saying, where did you get this? Why did you post this? I reached out to my own friends about some of their own posts. And then the fifth step was acknowledgement that if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, then it's probably a duck after you've done your research. Yeah.
First of all, I really called for any that and very what you
So when I collected my sources, I pulled directly from people that, how did I deal with so much data? I pulled directly from people that I follow, and I follow someone who lives in Israel. She lives in Herzliya, and I also follow people from here in Bellingham, Washington, who have a very different viewpoint than she does. And I didn't seek out any of these posts. I looked at what was on my social media. Usually I clicked on their post and followed some other links to try and track down sources sometimes, or try to see what other people were saying in the comments. But really the only thing I did was pull from what people were already posting in my sphere and then compared the two. When it came to some of the more traumatizing images, because social media is unregulated, they weren't hard to find. And usually they were some of the first posts that I was able to find on accounts, because they are the most shocking. But when I was compiling what I wanted to talk about in my paper, I sifted through some of the more traumatizing things and condensed down the messages of those posts into one single goal. What was the goal of the post? What was the goal of posting it? And then chose the photo that I felt was best representative of the goal of the account. And when it came to the more educational or less shocking information, I looked specifically for which ones include sources that I could track back. And I looked for people that were well-established and well-known reporting entities on social media already. Yeah.
Sorry.
We have time
I
for
missed
more?
that. Yes, I think I did.
Thank you for all your about. So I was just wondering, after all that work, what is your assessment on social media? Assessment about how the algorithms might address you?
Yeah. My social media is really private. Oh, sorry. How does my own account impact my view? I keep my social media pretty private. I have 48 total followers on Instagram, which is not how a lot of us handle social media, especially younger generations. But my algorithm really depends on the people in my life and who I follow. And I have found that the people that I follow from Washington typically post more liberally, and the people that I follow from North Carolina, where I'm from, post not so liberally. And the more that I click on certain posts and accounts, the more that my For You page or my Explore page will reflect what they were saying. Especially during this research when I was clicking through post after post after post to find certain things, sometimes I would notice that on my Explore page, there would suddenly be an image that I hadn't even considered seeing before or hadn't noticed prior to that. And so I do think social media with the algorithm will pick up on every single time that you click on something or view something or something is posted on your story. And if you look at it for enough period of time, like I did, they'll be like, oh, you like this, and here you go. And I also know that my own personal opinion, leaning more liberally, impacted the types of posts that I chose to display in this presentation. And so because I spent more time looking at those were showing up more and more on my Explore pages. But yes, I think the algorithm really is fast and it picks up immediately on what you're looking at.
Oh, well, I'm gonna hand it to you. Yeah, photos, we'll do a photo op. Here you go.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So,
Oh, yes.
So our
Sorry.
two presenters not able to attend the conference, unfortunately. Marcelina Mendoza Feliciano's presentation, the paper is certainly, I believe, available. But Professor Monson, who submitted this paper for consideration, is going to do a short introduction of the work.
Don't worry, very short, very short.
Elaborate a little bit.
Okay, we'll see if I can get this on my lapel. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. So thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks for all this great research. And I'll reiterate what we heard earlier. There were so many amazing presentations to choose from. It was actually, I think, the most number of papers that have been submitted since I've been here. So there's a lot of great work to look through, and yeah, just really cool topics ranging, huge range of topics. But I am very excited to tell you that the student that I nominated, Marcelina, was one of the winners of this year's award. And this is one of the first years we really thought about products other than papers being really eligible for this. So Marcelina didn't really write a paper per se. That was not the requirement of the research project. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about the class and what we did, and then tell you about her really impactful project that that she did. So this was for Ecology of Human Variation, which I taught last quarter. And in this version of the class, I decided to have a science communication project based on student research. So every student chose a topic that they found interesting and relevant, and then they designed a science communication project. So what science communication is, if you haven't engaged with that so much, and I think Kendall did a great job of introducing some similar themes, in that often it involves taking a topic that people don't know that much about or can be complicated. It involves identifying an audience that you want to reach, and then basically trying to communicate science to them. So it's a way of taking science outside of the classroom, outside of the textbooks, and trying to get it into the hands and the brains of people all over the world, all over the country. And so a big part of it is choosing your audience, deciding what you want to say, and it has to be tailored to the group that you're trying to reach. So we saw a lot of really amazing projects in the class. We saw, cooking videos and, art installations and gorilla suits and lots of things that are still in the hallways. But Marcelina's project I found particularly compelling. I certainly wasn't the only one, because I could tell when we did our checkups in class, people would volunteer to talk about where they were in their project and what they were doing. And it was very clear that all of the students in the class felt that Marcelina's project was extremely important. And they felt a little bit, I think maybe a little bit humbled about how impactful her project was and how much meaning it had, not just to her, but to the community that she was speaking to. So let me just start by reading you what's in the Scholars Week booklet, in case you haven't had a chance to see it. And then I'll just tell you a little bit about the lesson plan and why I nominated. Okay, so this is in your book, but I'll read it for you anyway in case you haven't gotten there. Lesson plan for skin color and color in Mixteco. Skin color and colors in Mixteco is a science communication project I did as part of my Anth 350 Ecology of Human Variation class. The chosen topic for this project was skin color, and the intended message for the intended audience was to understand that skin color is due to human genetic variation, the lived environment, and the vitamin D intake and its synthesis, and not due to race, which is a social construct. The dissemination of the project consisted of creating a lesson plan to teach the Mixteco Club at the Madison Elementary School in Mount Vernon, Washington. The club consisted of 27 students whose parents spoke any variation of Mixteco and attended Madison Elementary School. And just as an aside, Mixteco is an indigenous language of Mexico. The students were from kindergarten to 5th grade and were fluent in English and Spanish. The lesson plan provided background information about human genetic variation, including long-term and short-term evolutionary changes, pigmentation, body types, and acclimatization. It also included discussing how vitamin D digestion differs from skin color. And as part of that, she's talking about vitamin D synthesis and its relationship to skin pigmentation. The lesson plan was created in such a way as to allow for student participation, questions, and curiosity. Due to the diverse ages of the students in the Mixteco Club and the absence of one helper, I found that it was best to discuss this topic with students from 3rd grade and up, since they were the most engaged in the groups. Kindergarten, 1st graders, and some 2nd grade students were easily distracted and paid little attention to the discussion. Okay, so I think there's some really important parts of this project, and I do have the lesson plan here. So she wrote up a lesson plan that includes a title, skin color and color Mixteco. She has a vocabulary, including the colors here that she was talking about in English, Spanish, and Mixteco. She has an activity that she planned out. She has the summary of the tests, the tasks, including the minutes that they would take. So start by asking students why they think we have different skin colors. Okay, so I think you can already see that this is a complex topic that many of us would not feel brave enough to engage with in different audiences. Is it the same as their parents? Does it have a connection with the sun? What do they think race is? Okay, ask a 3rd grader, what is race? So that's a brave lesson plan, in my opinion. Speak for 5 to 10 minutes about race as a social construct, that it is human-made, man-made, that it involves a European ethnocentric view. Briefly discuss Linnaeus' taxonomic classification. Discuss Blumenbach's classification of humans into 5 races, which were labeled as colors. Okay. Provide some background information about human genetic variation, mostly as the result of adaptation to environment. Think about long-term evolutionary changes in pigmentation and body types as a response to environment. And then think about short-term temporary physiological responses to environment. This would be acclimatization. So for example, tanning or going to high altitude briefly. Then talk about connection to place. Washington State environment here. Is it cold? Do we have a lot of sunlight? What are the different seasons like? Then she had a UV map. I have some of the images here. I can't show all of them, but essentially UV maps of UV radiation around the planet. So if you're not familiar with this story, at higher latitudes, there's less UV radiation that gets through. Pigment, melanin is natural sunscreen. It blocks UV radiation. If you're in an area with a lot of UV, you want to block some of it because too much is bad for you. If you're in an area with not so much UV, you want to make sure it gets in because you need some to stimulate vitamin D production. So skin color is a response, an adaptive response to to people moving around the planet over hundreds of thousands of years. And so that's why we see variation, right? So she's got UV chart, she's got skin color chart, she's got the anatomy of skin that she talked about. And then talking about vitamin D here in Washington in particular, if you're not familiar with that, because we have such low UV, yes, this is where all the vampire movies are filmed. It also means you need to intake vitamin D. So supplements are highly recommended in this area, no matter how much melanin you have in your skin. And so discuss how populations have different pigmentations and it's associated with latitudes. And finally, provide information anthropology and its different branches, cultural, biological, archaeological, etc. Okay, so in terms of why I nominated this, I think any of us who taught in this room knows how difficult it is to design lesson plans and then implement them. I think it's the implementation that I found particularly really just excellent on Marcelina's, in her project, because she had to organize with the club. She had to get permission from all the people. She had to have, first I told her which audiences you already have access to. Think about who you're already connected to and what you could provide to them. So thinking about this mixed-stakeholder club she already works in, and then, how to actually get permission to present these lessons plans, how to think about what they might respond to and what might be useful to them. She got a lot of feedback from us. She said, I don't want to present, I don't want to show, there's all these superhero trading cards of Black South African scientists in paleontology, for example. It's just been this cool thing where people made trading superhero cards, super cool paleontologists who are doing great work. It's like, I don't want to present having darker skin as a superpower. I want everyone to just know we just have different skin color. It's not like a good thing or bad. It's like a response to our evolution, our environment, but it's not like one should be prized over the other. I don't want to give them that sense. So she was really thinking about all of the nuances of this and how children interpret it. And I just in the end, and she was able to give the lesson plan. She told us how they reacted, how the feedback was. And, I just found the project really well thought out, organized, implemented. She cared about it. The audience got a lot out of it. I think we could all stand to sit through this lesson plan every once in a while. And so for all of those reasons, I was very happy to nominate Marcelina for her project. And, it's unfortunate she can't be here today. She does work a full-time job and have a family outside of class. So I'm not surprised that she was busy, but really happy that we can at least take this time to acknowledge her work and her important contributions and, give her a little round of applause, right? Okay. I could try and answer questions, but, if you see her around the halls, you can.
We can maybe.
Sure. Yeah, everybody's right. You undergraduates did such great work.
Yes. So, and we do have the archaeology symposium coming up in 5 minutes. So things are moving right along. Thank you very, very much for coming to this inaugural session. I hope you will, if you are able, continue to attend the rest of the talk. And I think it's huge, right?